Good Friday morning, and welcome to this week's episode of Finding God in the Dark. My name is Reverend Don Stevens, and my our guest and hopefully ongoing friend for the pod is Reverend Janathan Campbell. Jonathan, why don't you tell the listeners or the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Okay, I am a Methodist pastor, so we aren't checking any denominational diversity boxes, but another Methodist pastor. Um, I serve a church in Lacey Township, Lacey United Methodist Church. Um, in terms of theology, I'm probably on the Methodist stream. I'm probably more progressive, center left, I guess I would say. And then I have a disability, so that informs a lot of my theology, and there's disability theology around that, so that often uh, kind of helps me focus in a lens through which I look at things, including movies. So
Right. Now, for those who have been watching the podcast for the since we started, um, Jonathan and I obviously were colleagues. You know, we know each other that way, but we were in a PACE group. Now, PACE was an acronym for Pursuing Clergy Excellence. It was a PACE group that I put together back in 2019
yeah,
into 2020. And the whole idea of the PACE group was there's a group of clergy met, we went to the movies and we'd watch a film, we'd pick it out on site.
yeah,
And then after the movie, we went over to the Panera Bread nearby and we talked about it.
talked about that. Yeah, and
Which was,
it caused COVID.
yeah, well, that's what shut it down. I think the last film we watched was in March of 2020.
Yeah,
Um, but that was uh, that was how we became friends.
yeah,
And so this very podcast really builds off of some of that that was done in that pace group. So thank you, Jonathan. I'm really happy to have you here. I know Evan said the same thing when I said, hey, maybe we can ask Jonathan to be part of it. He goes, that's a great idea. So
yeah,
so we're thrilled to, like, I want to bring perspective. That's the entire for me. The entire reason we do this is to bring perspective and hopefully give some folks some skills to
yeah,
look at
absolutely.
movies in a discerning way. So,
Yeah,
so uh, love bringing that. So, anyway, we're going to talk today about a film that the two of us have seen. I was going to save it for Evan, but if he can't get himself through Schindler's List in 2 weeks, then he's out. So the film we're going to talk about today is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes,
yeah, long
which
time.
is a new film. It's a 2024 film. It's out in theaters now.
Yeah,
It was directed by Wes Ball, written by Josh Friedman. It is a standalone sequel. I'm reading this is from Wikipedia, so folks don't, think I'm this smart. I'm smart enough to look things up. It's a standalone sequel to War for the Planet of the Apes, which came out in 2017. It is the fourth installment in the reboot series of the Planet of the Apes films. That the first three were really, I think they were a star vehicle for Andy Serkis, right? Doing the motion capture work as Caesar in those films.
yeah,
And it is the 10th Planet of the Apes film overall. You go back all the way to 1968.
yeah.
This film stars Owen Teague in the lead role, Freya Allen, who you might know from The Witcher, Kevin Durand, who has been in things like The Strain, and of course William H. Macy, which if you don't know who he is, you're not watching movies.
Yeah.
So, and it takes place 300 years after the events of the first three films. So that sets it up. What did you just saw it, right, John?
Yeah, I saw it yesterday.
Okay. So what's your first impressions on it?
Um, I enjoyed some of the themes in it. I have not. I saw the original movie with Charlton Heston in the '60s, but I
Hmm.
didn't see the series of movies that followed that. And then I've seen parts of, if not all of the reboot stuff. Um, I thought it was good. It had some interesting ideas. I felt like the original series with Heston, I feel like really was tackling the reality of racism. Like you could see that undercurrent.
Very obvious. Yeah.
Um, I feel like this, especially this movie, was really hitting hard this idea of environmentalism and how humans connect with the planet or don't connect with the planet.
Hmm.
And so that was really interesting to play around with. I thought it was interesting that you didn't have either either the ape character Noah or um, the two. I feel like the two primary folks were either the human character May or Noah, the lead ape character, if you will.
Hmm.
And you had moments for both of them to show this deep level of humanity, and they both essentially let folks die when they could have chose to save them, which was an interesting choice. Neither the human nor the animal kind of rose above and was a kind of did a hero move. I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know what
Yeah.
you thought.
I tell you, the thing that was most striking to me was how, um, if you notice the pendant that Raka, the
Yeah,
orangutan, wore,
yeah,
and he considered himself a disciple of Caesar, and the pendant was actually the window
yeah.
from the attic in the first movie, which was
Okay,
Caesar's view on the world, right, as a
yeah,
baby.
that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
And so Caesar has become this Christ-like figure,
Yeah,
right? This legendary Christ-like figure. And yet you look at these two different factions. So you have these
yeah,
very peaceful
yeah,
orangutans who are following the peaceful teachings and get along with humans, and
yeah,
and then the Proximus Caesar faction, which was very warlike, and
yeah,
and I mean you saw that dichotomy in the first
yeah.
three films for sure.
Yes.
And here they put both of them in the same film.
Well, it's that idea of who, if to translate it into a conversation our churches might have. Um, it's about who holds the authentic Jesus. You know, who's
Right,
who is really following Jesus.
right.
And that idea of who's really following Caesar. Yeah, you have this idea of how you can manipulate the teachings of a great religious leader to fit your needs instead of actually being challenged by the teachings to modify what you're doing to what the teachings are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean it was to me that was really striking in the film.
yeah,
Just stood way out. Like it's almost like these two separate groups are venerating two separate people, and yet
yeah,
it's the same character,
yeah,
and it's very easy to transfer that idea over to the church and see how the church will mold Jesus into what we want Jesus to be,
yeah,
mold God and put God in the box that's convenient for us.
yeah,
Oh, this is the God I worship because that's what I like.
yeah.
Well, is that I don't know. Is that right? you know?
Yeah, you have that. I can't remember the gorilla character's name, the kind of the the heavy for the for
Proximus
uh,
Caesar.
yeah, no, I'm talking about the gorilla who was kind of his security guy, if you will.
Yeah, I don't remember.
It,
Lightning. I
it,
think his name was Lightning,
okay,
actually.
so we'll go with Lightning. We'll just make it give him a name.
I just read the
Yep,
credits a few minutes ago, so I
yep.
think that's what it was, but
Okay, so you have Lightning introduces Caesar in this movie, and he keeps saying for Caesar. We're
Mhm.
doing this for Caesar. We're doing this for Caesar. And all the time, he's essentially killing or harming other apes.
Right.
And then you have the first time Raka kind of comes in and talks about Caesar. The first thing Raka mentions about Caesar is you're not supposed to harm another ape. And so you get this very clear kind of dichotomy of, well, what would Caesar want us to do? Harm each other or
Right.
hurt each other to garner power? Who's the
Right.
Caesar we're talking about?
Is Caesar, a model for peace, or is
Yeah.
Caesar a model for conquest? And
Yeah.
and if you go back to the three original movies in this series or the reboot series,
Yeah.
you can make that argument either way. I
Yeah.
mean, Caesar initially, certainly in the first film, is a very sympathetic character. He just
Yeah.
wants to be part of the family. James Franco is his dad.
Yeah.
Just wants to be part of a family and struggles with, am I a pet?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And then it kind of turns when he realizes that he is different,
Yeah.
right? And so he's going to have to fend for himself. And then in the second film, you get more of that conflict angle. And by the third film, it is all out war.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, Caesar's both. So
Yeah.
you can see how the idea came down over the ages in two different directions.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I when you asked me to do this, it was a no-brainer to say yes to me because every year I do an Oscar sermon series.
uh-huh.
And so we usually watch the movie together on a Saturday night. We do dinner as a congregation, and then I talk about it on Sunday.
That's cool.
And yeah, I enjoy it. I try to do it every year. It's really fun for me. But you know, so I've trained myself to think about, okay, what passage of scripture am I going to use with this movie?
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is what came to me when I was thinking about this is that a powerful passage in Mark, or sorry, not Mark, but Matthew, where Matthew lets us know that Barabbas, which his name literally means son of God, his first name is Jesus. So it's literally Jesus Barabbas or Jesus of Nazareth. And you have two choices, right? And
Mm-hmm.
Matthew is not just telling the story, he's pointing it back to the audience of his gospel and asking you, who are you going to follow?
Right.
Do you want this violent guy that's going to free you from the Romans by killing them? Or do you want to follow this guy that says we're going to live in community and turn our enemies into our friends and our family? Who
Right.
are you going to follow?
Right.
And you know that falls right in line with this idea about who is Caesar and who are you going to follow? Which
Yeah.
Caesar do you follow? Which Jesus do you follow?
Yeah.
Same kind of idea.
And what's interesting is, at least when you look at that, the way that's laid out in this film, right?
Yeah.
The peaceful followers of Caesar
Yeah.
are one. It's Rocca. He's the only
Yeah.
one you meet,
And
right?
he ultimately dies in the movie.
And
So
right,
his
self-sacrificially, by
yeah,
the way,
yeah,
saving a human.
yeah.
So,
So you could, if you really want to, I don't think this is where they were going, but if you really want to twist it, you can say the people that follow the peaceful Jesus or the peaceful Caesar get wiped out. So what's the point? Like I'm
mm,
not, I'm not endorsing that. I'm just saying,
no, I get it. But I get you're not endorsing it. But
yeah,
realistically,
yeah.
that has been a historical fact
Oh, absolutely.
that peaceful sects of Christianity have been oppressed and
Yes.
sometimes close to wiped out
Yeah.
simply because they are Christ followers.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's reality.
Yeah.
And certainly the stronger faction, those who follow Proximus Caesar,
Yeah.
they're but they're also, I mean, they suppress their own kind.
Yeah.
They oppress apes, they enslave other apes to
Yeah.
try to do open this vault for them,
Yeah. Yes. There's
Um,
this idea of um, again, it rolls into this idea that I think we, as a species of human beings, need to struggle with, which is um, we have a tendency to create new technology and then think about the ethical ramifications of using it.
yes.
And that's what this film, that vault represents. Behind that vault, we don't know what's behind it for most of the movie, but when we get back there, we learn there's guns, there's weapons that would
Thanks.
take
Yeah.
Caesar Proximus's community to almost unstoppable. You
Right.
know, um, and and yet all he wants is the technology. There's no thought about, okay, is this best for us? Is this
Right.
going to help us bring? It's all about consolidating his power, and he doesn't care. And human beings have often done that. I mean, look
Yeah.
at just, again, the first film is about racism and about the atomic age, right? I mean, literally the movie ends with uh, Charlton Heston learning that he's come back to planet Earth, but planet Earth basically has been bombed
Right.
out of existence, right?
You maniacs, you blew it all up. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, we could, granted we're jumping onto another film, and I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but Oppenheimer reflects on this idea that it was all about creating the atomic bomb, and nobody really thought about, hey, is this good idea to use?
Right.
Like that
Right.
discussion never comes up.
It is a quandary, I think, always. And I don't know if society approaches it the way the church thinks about it, at least,
Yeah,
because for me, anyway, when we come upon these things, I kind of reflect back. I'm gonna pull in another movie,
yeah,
Jurassic Park.
yeah,
Okay, I reflect back to where Malcolm in Jurassic Park says, you realized you could do something, but you never stopped to think if you should.
yes,
You're willing to play God.
yeah.
And that's what there's certainly that sense of that there, right? That Proximus Caesar is willing to play God. He's strictly about the power. He wants to get his
And
hands on those weapons, those human weapons.
and then what's fascinating is the May character, the human character, has real deep fear, which on one level makes sense of Proximus getting these weapons.
Hmm.
And she ultimately destroys the cavern where these weapons and other things are there.
Right.
But yet, um, there was no reflection on human beings had those weapons and they destroyed themselves. Like, you know,
Right. And she does that. I mean, she destroys that cavern at the expense of her friend's family and her friend's
yeah,
tribe.
yeah. We didn't get a lot of exposition about how many people were lost, how many apes were lost, but there had to be apes that died in
Right.
her making sure that he didn't get those guns and those other
Mhm.
weapons.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there wasn't any kind of sense of again that you have a human being doing this violent action that harms uh, parts of
Oth-
creation.
Other sentient beings.
Yes,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
Yeah.
harming these. You're right, sentencing these apes, and yet in her mind, she's doing the good thing, and you're like, but
Right.
you know,
And ultimately what we find out is what she didn't want the weapons. She
yeah,
wanted it was basically oh, I forget what they call that.
yeah. Basically, it was a means by which to hopefully communicate with the world. I
with
mean,
with other human
with
beings.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so is that where's the is that also a power grab, right?
yeah,
Because now we're going to organize all the remaining human beings and
yeah.
you know so I think in a sense that's setting up the next movie,
Yeah, and then you have
obviously,
yeah,
but
you're obviously there's going to be this idea of, and again, the movie seems to set up this idea of, okay, next will be the humans trying to take back the world,
right.
and you have this conversation about, well, that last part of the movie where Noah and May have a conversation about what's for humans and what's for apes,
Mm-hmm.
and that goes straight to biblical concepts of human beings have a tendency to see themselves as it's us and then creation. And yet, so much of the Bible is about this idea that we're really woven together.
Right.
And
That we're a part
um,
of creation. Yeah.
and we're part of creation. And yet, we always have a tendency to think these other things in creation are just for our use, you know. And that's where we get
Yeah.
into trouble. We get into trouble over and over again because we fall into that same trap of this is just for us instead of we're part of this. Yeah.
Yeah. that we're created, that the world was created for us, and rather than us being created for the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what again is that not that whole idea of power structures,
Yeah.
and who's on top, which this is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this film because it was so rich in all of that kind of theme and stuff,
Yeah.
that it
Yeah.
and you can
Yeah.
take it for at its face value and just go, oh, it's
Yeah.
a great little action movie, and it
Yeah.
is,
Hmm.
but there was like so much more than that there, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I'd be curious to talk with the folks who wrote it. Um, I felt like an interesting kind of dig when he talks about there's a Travian, I think his name is, another human.
yeah.
Uh,
Trevathan, William H. Macy's character.
Janathan. Yeah, yeah. And he is basically helping Maximus, or yeah, he's this Proximus Caesar.
Hmm.
He's helping him.
Hmm.
He's tutoring him, and at one point he says, "Yeah, he's really fascinated with human history, especially the Romans." And there's so much, especially alpha male culture, where alpha male culture focuses on the Romans as kind of the high point of humanity.
Right.
And so I kind of wondered if there was a shot there about
A
you might
little
want
bit
to
of
read more about
backhand.
history than just the Romans, like
Yeah,
um,
yeah, I caught that.
yeah,
I caught that, that it was almost a little bit of a backhand just to human supremacy even,
yeah,
Um, yeah. And William H. Macy was a really interesting character in that.
yeah,
I think he fashioned himself almost as the advisor to
yeah,
Proximus Caesar.
yeah,
He was reading to him because the apes couldn't read,
yeah,
right? They had not learned other than they learned vocal language, but not written language.
yeah,
And so the books mostly were banned or destroyed, except that Proximus Caesar had a giant library,
yeah.
and William H. Macy's Trevathan's character's whole job was to read to Proximus Caesar.
Well, and again, we have that. You can have that conversation about um, him not teaching him the skill, right? He's keeping the skill for himself. He's keeping his purpose by denying a skill to another being.
Right.
That kind of idea of teach a man to fish kind of thing. That you know
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And you have this kind of, again, you have the conversation about what's our role with other human beings. To me, I got a lot of sense of, I didn't get as much a discussion around racism as much as I got a kind of an interesting thought about the global north and the global south. And as we're talking about environmentalism and our need to deal with stuff like global warming, there is a lot of pressure for places like India and China and Latin America not to use fossil fuels, or not to use uh, the technologies that help the West become so dominant. And it's like, well, it's bad for the environment. And you can see a response from folks in the global South being like, yeah, but you're also keeping us from economic security. You're keeping us from the ability to advance the way you did.
Right.
And you get those themes here where the humans are like, you can't have the things that we used because you'll misuse them without any reflection that they misused them.
Yeah.
You know,
And that's a whole control and power thing, right?
yeah.
Because what is the power? The power is the control. You
And
know.
the human tendency, because of sin, for us to not reflect on the fact that we misuse power too.
Right.
And so we fear people being in power, but we often don't recognize what we do when we have power. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and what do we say? You know, like people just wow, talk about being tone deaf, right? Or
Yes.
not reading the room or whatever.
Or yeah, having a huge ethical blind side, really, about kind of that idea of not doing any introspection about who you are, how you got here, you
Yeah.
know. Um, because again, technology, if I remember the three movies that came before this, humans develop a virus that kills almost all humans. They used
It was
technology and it killed them.
yeah, it was a retrovirus that he was trying to develop to cure Alzheimer's.
Yeah,
Very altruistic.
yeah,
What a wonderful thing to do, except that it got out of hand. It, you
yeah,
know, and again, we go back to asking the Malcolm from Jurassic Park question. You
yeah.
know, just because you could, you never asked if you should.
You should. Yeah,
You know, yeah.
yeah.
Wow, great stuff, John. It's great stuff. um, so next week,
Yeah.
um, Evan has promised me he's going to finish watching Schindler's List.
Okay.
Now I give the guy a lot of I give him a lot of grace because he's got four kids and his
Yes.
kids
He's
are
got four
little.
little kids,
You
and
know, like yeah, you and I,
yeah,
our kids are a little bit older. You know, my
yes, yep,
youngest is 11 and he
yep,
can pretty much take care of himself.
yep.
So you know, that's not an issue.
Oh,
But Evan's kids are much Charlie's only like I don't think Charlie's even two yet, or might be just two.
okay.
So, you know, his kids are a lot younger.
Yes.
I get it.
Yeah.
You know, so but he says he's gonna get through that too. But if you have seen it or if you want to watch it again, I
Oh,
just
yeah,
watched it
yeah.
myself recently.
Yeah, I've seen it. I'll watch it again. Yeah, I'll try to join you next week. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah. So I'll be
It's
sending
kind
you
of a
the
weird
link
to
for
say with
that.
Schindler's List.
What's
Probably shouldn't say a lot of fun with Schindler's List. Those two things don't really go together.
well, you're right. It's not a fun movie, but the discussion should be fun, and
Yeah,
that's the important part. You know, I love having these discussions, and you and
yeah,
I don't have to agree even a
yeah,
little bit on stuff.
no,
I think on this film we agree a lot, but
yeah,
you know, we don't even have to. The whole point is, look, we're bringing perspective. We're bringing our own perspective and hopefully our own tradition and our own understanding of Methodist theology,
yeah,
and that's going to translate to the folks that watch it. So
yeah. We hope that they'll do the same with their friends and family.
exactly, exactly. So friends, stay tuned. We'll be back next week, always on Friday mornings at 10 a.m. And till then, keep on finding God in the dark, and we will see you later.